Picture this. You're sitting at Sunday dinner and your dad, good man, worked hard his whole life, genuinely wants the best for you, looks across the table and says, just save your money, work hard and you'll be fine. And you nod because what else do you do? He's your dad. He built a life. He paid off a house. He retired reasonably comfortably. So you smile, you say, yeah, you're right. And then you go home and open your banking app and stare at the $847 left in your account 11 days before your next paycheck and think, I am working hard. I am saving. So why does it feel like I'm falling further behind every single month? That feeling isn't weakness. That feeling isn't failure. That feeling is a data point. And what that data point is telling you is that the rules of the game changed and nobody told you. My name is Smith, and I spend way too much time thinking about why an entire generation is doing everything they were told to do and still losing financially. If you're someone who grew up with parents who had their financial lives mostly figured out, but their advice somehow doesn't seem to translate to your reality, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up because what we're about to unpack is going to reframe every piece of money advice you've ever been given. And honestly, it might make you a little angry. That's okay. Anger is a great motivator when you point it in the right direction. Here's the thing. Your parents weren't wrong. I want to be really clear about that before we go any further. The advice they gave you, save money, avoid debt, get a stable job, buy a house, contribute to your pension, that advice worked. It worked beautifully for the world they lived in. The problem isn't that your parents gave you bad advice. The problem is that they handed you a map to a city that no longer exists, and you've been wandering around with that map wondering why none of the streets match up. So let's talk about why the map is wrong, and more importantly, let's build you a new one. The first piece of advice that no longer works the way it used to is the one that sounds the most innocent and the most obviously true. Just save your money. Put it in a savings account. Let it sit. Watch it grow. Your parents probably did exactly this. They had a savings account at their local bank, they put money in it every month, and over time, it actually did something meaningful for them. Here's what most people don't realize. That's not because your parents were financially savvy geniuses. It's because interest rates were completely different. In the 1980s, a standard savings account at a major American bank was paying somewhere between 5 and 8% annual interest. Some high-yield accounts were paying double digits. Your parents could literally put money in a savings account and watch it grow at a rate that outpaced inflation. Saving was by itself a wealth-building strategy. Not a great one, not the best one, but a genuinely functional one. Fast forward to today, the average savings account interest rate at a traditional bank in America right now sits at approximately 0.46%, according to the FDIC. 0.46%. Inflation over the last several years has run between 4 and 8% annually, which means that every single year your money sits in a traditional savings account, you are losing real purchasing power. You are getting poorer by saving. The advice, just save your money in a traditional savings account today, is the financial equivalent of your parents telling you to drive to work and you showing up with a horse and buggy. The destination is right. The vehicle is completely wrong. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Nick, but what about high-yield savings accounts? Some of those are paying 4 or 5% now. And yes, that's true, and yes, you should absolutely be using one. But here's the deeper issue. Even at 5% in a high-yield savings account, you're roughly keeping pace with inflation in a good year. You are not building wealth, you are treading water. And treading water when you're trying to get to shore is exhausting, and it doesn't actually move you anywhere. The version of save your money that actually works in today's economy looks like this. You save a specific intentional emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of expenses, sitting in a high-yield savings account, not touched, and then everything beyond that gets invested, not saved. Invested. The savings account is a tool with a very specific job, liquidity and safety. It was never supposed to be a wealth-building vehicle. Your parents used it that way because for a window of time, interest rates made that possible. That window closed. The playbook changed. Most people just didn't get the memo. The second piece of advice that has aged terribly is get a good stable job and stay there. And this one is painful because it comes from a place of real love. Your parents watched people get hired at a company at 22 and retire from that same company at 65 with a pension and a gold watch and a genuinely comfortable retirement. That was a real thing that really happened, and the lesson they drew from it was correct for that environment. Loyalty and stability equal financial security. Here's the thing. That world is almost entirely gone. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median number of years that wage and salary workers have been with their current employer is now 3.9 years. 4 years, not 40. And that number is even lower for workers between 25 and 34. The median tenure there is about 2.8 years. The era of the 40-year career at one company with a guaranteed pension at the end has been replaced by something completely different, and the financial implications of that shift are enormous. Pensions, the cornerstone of your parents' retirement security, have been almost entirely replaced by 401ks and self-directed retirement accounts, which sounds like a minor administrative change, but is actually one of the most significant transfers of financial risk in modern economic history. With a pension, your employer assumes the risk. They promise you a specific monthly payment in retirement regardless of what the market does. With a 401k, you assume the risk. The market goes up, great. The market crashes the year before you retire, you deal with it. Your parents' generation largely had someone else managing and guaranteeing their retirement income. Your generation is almost entirely on your own. Same destination, completely different responsibility structure. Here's where it gets interesting, because the logical response to this shift isn't to just work harder at one company and hope for the best. The logical response is to treat your career completely differently than your parents treated theirs. The data is very clear on this. People who change jobs strategically, not randomly, strategically, typically see salary increases of 10 to 20% per move, according to research from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. People who stay at the same company and rely on annual raises typically see increases of 3 to 4%, which after inflation is often a real terms pay cut. Here's the math on what that means over a career. Let's say you're 25 years old, making $55,000 a year. Person A follows the old advice, stays loyal, gets 3% raises annually, retires at 65. Person B makes 2 or 3 strategic job moves over the next decade, each time negotiating a 15% salary increase. By age 35, Person A is making roughly $73,000. Person B is making somewhere around $100,000 to $115,000. That gap compounds over an entire career into a difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars in lifetime earnings, before you even account for the difference in what each person is able to invest. The loyalty strategy doesn't just cost you salary, it costs you everything that salary could have become. Now look, I'm not telling you to be a flaky employee who jumps ship every 6 months. Professional reputation matters, skills and depth matter. What I'm telling you is that the psychological framework your parents gave you, find a good company and stay there, don't rock the boat, be grateful you have a job, that framework actively works against your financial interests in today's labor market. It was wise advice for a different economy. In this economy, it's a wealth suppression strategy. The third piece of advice, and this is the big one, the one that's going to make some of you uncomfortable, is buy a house as soon as you can. Stop throwing money away on rent. And I understand why this advice exists. For most of your parents' adult lives, buying a home was one of the most reliable wealth-building tools available to the average American. They bought houses that cost 2 or 3 times their annual income. Those houses appreciated dramatically. They built equity. It worked. Here's what most people don't realize. The math on home ownership has changed so drastically in the last 20 years that in many markets, buying a home as early as possible is no longer automatically the right financial move. According to the National Association of Realtors, the median home price in the United States in 1990 was approximately $123,000. The median household income that year was around $29,000. That's a price-to-income ratio of roughly 4.2 to 1. Today, the median home price is hovering around $420,000, and the median household income is approximately $74,000. That's a price-to-income ratio of nearly 5.7 to 1. And then major cities, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Miami, Austin, we're talking about ratios of 10 to 1, 12 to 1, sometimes higher. Your parents bought homes that cost 4 times their income. In major metropolitan areas today, young people are being asked to buy homes that cost 10 to 12 times their income. These are not the same financial decision wearing the same clothes. These are fundamentally different transactions with fundamentally different risk profiles and fundamentally different impacts on long-term wealth. And here's the psychological piece that makes this so hard to navigate. The advice, "don't throw money away on rent," has been repeated so many times by so many well-meaning people that it has become almost unchallengeable. It feels like truth. But let me show you what renting actually looks like when you run the numbers honestly. Say you're in a city where buying a reasonable home costs $500,000. With a 20% down payment, which is $100,000, money that most people in their 20s simply do not have, your mortgage at current interest rates, plus property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, runs you approximately $3,800 to $4,200 a month. A comparable rental in the same neighborhood might run $2,800 to $3,200 a month. The difference is roughly $1,000 a month. If the renter takes that $1,000 monthly difference and invests it consistently in a broad market index fund over 10 years, they accumulate somewhere between $190,000 and $210,000 in invested assets, not counting the $100,000 down payment they also never tied up. Now, add the opportunity cost of that $100,000 down payment invested over 10 years at historical market returns, and you're looking at another $260,000 in potential wealth. That renter hasn't thrown money away. That renter has been quietly building a parallel wealth engine, while the conventional wisdom told them they were losing. Now, you might be thinking, but Nick, what about home appreciation? What about building equity? And yes, in many markets and over long time horizons, home ownership does build wealth. I'm not telling you never to buy. I'm telling you that the decision is dramatically more complicated than renting is throwing money away, and that the blanket advice to buy as soon as possible, regardless of price to income ratios, regardless of local market conditions, regardless of your personal financial situation, that advice is costing people real money in today's environment. The new framework isn't buy versus rent. The new framework is, what is the total cost of ownership in my specific market versus the total cost of renting plus strategic investing of the difference, and which one builds more wealth over my specific time horizon? That's a spreadsheet question, not a feelings question. Your parents answered it with feelings because when they answered it, the feelings and the math pointed in the same direction. Today, in many markets, they don't. Here's the thread that ties all of this together, and it's the most important thing I'm going to say in this entire video. Your parents gave you the right principles. Work hard, live below your means, build assets, think long term. Don't waste money. Those principles are eternal and they still work. What doesn't work anymore are the specific vehicles and strategies they use to execute those principles, because those vehicles were shaped by an economic environment that no longer exists. High-interest savings accounts are gone. Defined benefit pensions are almost gone. The era of housing as an automatically accessible, reliably affordable wealth vehicle for young people is severely strained. The 40-year single-employer career has been replaced by a fluid, dynamic labor market that rewards strategic movement. The economic landscape your parents navigated has been replaced by something fundamentally different. And the tragedy, and I mean this sincerely, is that nobody sat you down and explained the translation. Nobody said, here are the principles and here's how to apply them to the world that actually exists right now. Instead, you got the old instructions for the new machine and wondered why nothing worked. So here's your updated playbook. Instead of saving in a traditional account, you invest consistently and automatically. Index funds, retirement accounts, high-yield accounts for your emergency fund, and nothing sitting idle in a 0.46% savings account. Instead of staying loyal to an employer and hoping for recognition, you treat your career like a business, invest in your skills relentlessly, and move strategically when the market rewards it. Instead of buying a home because that's what adults do, you run the actual math for your specific city and your specific financial situation and make the decision that builds the most wealth, whether that's buying or renting plus investing the difference. And the meta skill underneath all of this, the one your parents actually were teaching you, even if they didn't frame it this way, is to think critically about money, to not accept conventional wisdom without examining it, to ask, does this advice actually apply to my situation, in my time, in my market? Your parents were financially successful in part because they thought carefully about money in their context. The best way to honor that is to do the same thing in yours. The map changed, the territory changed, but your capacity to read the new map, to understand the new territory, to build real wealth in the world that actually exists, that hasn't changed at all. You have everything you need. You just needed someone to tell you the old directions were leading you the wrong way. Now you know. Go build something different.